Hey everyone, it is late at night and I'm Norman. I've spoken about an issue that a group of my watches have a few times on this channel, and I've also mentioned my plan to deal with it. I just never sat down and had the time to do it. But I have done it, and so far I've succeeded. I have actually fixed all of my neo-vintage swatches. And tonight I'm going to show you what I did to accomplish that. So if any of you out there have neo-vintage swatches, they probably have this issue, and tonight I'll show you how to fix it. So let us begin. I have to apologize up front for my gnarly looking thumb. I had a waffle maker slam shut on it while I was cleaning it, so sorry about that. In my State of the Collection video on my swatches, I mentioned, again, the issue that all older neo-vintage swatches, so from the 80s and 90s, they all seem to have the same issue. And that is with this area right here. And I also need to apologize for the terminology. I'm not sure what you would call some of these pieces of anatomy, but here where the battery hatch slides into place in the case, this particular one near the lugs cracks and in some cases breaks off. And if that breaks off, that is enough for this battery hatch to lift up slightly, which causes the watches to periodically stop running because the battery loses contact. I had no idea how prevalent this issue was because all of the swatches that I had purchased from Squiggly back in the day all just kind of worked and had no issues. It wasn't until I started buying swatches on eBay. I bought my turquoise bay and it randomly stopped, so I bought another one. It did the same. Same with the Techno, the Tech swatch. That was when I went back and looked at all my other old ones, and sure enough, they all had cracks right there. And in that same State of the Collection video, I also pointed out how Swatch apparently is aware of this problem and has moved this opening over a little bit in their newer pieces. So hopefully that doesn't become a problem. Although, to be fair, the other watches are really old. Some of them are 40 some years old. That's actually not too bad for a watch that's designed to be throwaway. Wear until it falls apart. Well, those other ones are still going. So my thinking was, maybe I could use an epoxy or a super glue to either stop that crack from getting worse or even to rebuild up this little mound here. Years ago, I had a pair of workout shoes and the metal eyelet came out of one of the lace holes, and I used whatever Gorilla Glue we had at the time, and that produced a yellowy plastic around that opening, which worked perfectly. And so my thought was maybe Gorilla Glue would do the trick. Even if it dries yellow, these are my personal watches. I won't ever be selling them, and that's on the back of the watch. However, this standard clear Gorilla Glue just doesn't work. It is way too runny. You can't build up anything with this. And honestly, I've had no luck with this glue in general. Trying to glue other items, just kind of garbage. So I tried picking up some Gorilla Glue gel glue, and this works much better. This is what I used on these swatches, and if you would like to get some to maybe repair an old swatch that you have, I'll have an affiliate link in the show notes below, just in case. I fixed these a few days ago and they're still going. They're all still telling time. I've been wearing them, kind of testing it, and so far so good. It is tougher to get the battery hatch back on, which is probably good. That means that they're really snug now, but this is the stuff. So I'm going to show you everything that I used to fix these swatches, and I'll go over each swatch that I fixed and end with the worst case scenario where a chunk of it had actually come off. So when I was working on these, I laid down a piece of paper towel so that glue doesn't get all over the table, and I used a Q-tip to apply the glue. I also used some petroleum jelly or Vaseline, and what I did with that is I dipped this in it so that there was a glob of it on here. And on the battery hatch itself, I applied some to this tang here that goes into that slot, as well as around the edge of the battery hatch, about half of it, any place that might come in contact with glue. Unfortunately, these hatches have sort of a gasket on the inside, and this would end up sticking to the glue a bit. But if this isn't present, the hatch doesn't really go onto the watch. I tried a bunch, but it just doesn't quite line up right or something. It just wouldn't turn and go onto the watch. So I had to put this back in and just deal with it kind of sticking to the glue a little bit. When I finally work the hatch out of there and remove it, there'll be a little tiny bit of black where it came in contact with that glue. Then what I did was I put the battery hatch in place and I put a large drop of glue on the Q-tip. Now where I was doing the gluing and the building of the mound here, the Q-tip itself didn't come in contact with the watch, just the drop of glue. So there was no fibers on there. I did use a clean end of this to wipe glue off of the hatch, and that didn't leave fibers either. As you'll see, it didn't completely remove the glue either, and I also did all of this while I was wearing a loop so that I can see exactly what I was doing. This is fairly small work, and I'm trying to rebuild a part of the watch case in some of these instances. Other times I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't getting glue all over the place. Also, before I began working on them, I made sure to remove the strap so that no glue gets on those, and just kind of rebuilt this thing. Once I was done, I had to work the battery hatch out of there, and I'll go over some special things I had to do when we get to the final watch in regards to that. But this particular watch just had a crack. The piece was still attached, but in time it would get worse and probably come off. So I glued that to stop that crack from getting worse and just kind of making it more solid again. And sure enough, it's still telling time. This is another one of my squiggly pieces, and it had kind of the same thing, so I just repaired the crack there. On one of these, I don't think it was this one, there was also a crack over on this side that I glued up. But you can still see some kind of glue residue on this hatch. But again, it's the back of the watch, so it's fine. And the last three swatches were probably the worst. These were the eBay finds. This one, it was still attached, but the cracking on it seemed to be a bit worse than the other ones. So I got that one repaired. Same with the second turquoise bay that I purchased. This one was cracked, but still present. But even then, with just a crack, it was enough to allow this battery hatch to rise up a bit. Not as bad as my other one, but it still wasn't reliable. It had stopped a few times. And this one is also still going. I've worn this one a couple times since fixing it. The worst one of all of them Happens to be my favorite of the two turquoise bays. This one just, with that yellow, seems to have richer colors. But the little tang here was completely gone. And so I had to rebuild that entire mound there. And it doesn't, I'm hoping on video you can see it. With the naked eye, it looks like it's still missing, but I think that's because the Gorilla Glue is clear and the rest of the case is yellow. I'm hoping I can capture this so you can see it on video. There's a clear little bit that I rebuilt with the Gorilla Glue. But this hatch was really tough to take off after I had to redo that. So I used both a nickel, which is the usual way of removing these hatches. It actually works much better than the swatch tools that the brand provides for removing these. But I also have a rubber belt, like from a vacuum cleaner, and I used that. I set it on here and rotated it and used friction to try and get this thing off. So the combination of those two worked pretty well. You might have to find something grippy, like one of those grip mats that you would put in the bottom of a drawer, or like a rubber belt like I did. Something along those lines to help get that hatch out initially. Unless your application of petroleum jelly was good enough to keep all that glue from sticking to it, then you might be fine. But look at that. Compared to my contemporary one, it's a little bit slow, but I don't think it's actually stopped. I think that might be user error in setting the time, because I've been keeping my eyes on these throughout the day here and there, and they're all pretty much keeping the same time. For the most part. Some of these more minimal ones, unless it's on the hour or half hour, or some easy to set time like that, because there's 0 markers, it's kind of difficult to get the right time on them. But as far as I've noticed, none of them have stopped. So, yeah. It appears for now this fix has worked. I'll be keeping my eye on it. And I don't know how long, especially this one, this rebuild, will last. I don't know if the glue will break off of there. We'll see. If it does, I'll try an epoxy of some kind. But so far this Gorilla Glue seems to work. So there you go. If you have neo vintage swatches and they start developing this problem, you may be able to fix it.